They were not goddesses. They were perfectly packaged transactions. All of them sat on Johnny Carson's legendary sofa. All of them smiled under the brightest lights in America. But what if that sofa was never just a place for conversation? What if it was a silent witness stand where glamour began to crack? Hollywood's golden age has long been sold as a dream factory. Yet behind the velvet curtains and studio applause, many insiders described a different reality. A marketplace. Beauty was currency. Desire was leverage. Marriage could be strategy. Contracts controlled weight, behavior, even morality. Young actresses were given stimulants to work longer, sedatives to sleep faster, and image guidelines to remain desirable at all costs. Some women were crushed by that system. Some learned to negotiate with it. Some fought it in court, and some turned the rules back on the men who wrote them. The story is not simple, and it is not clean. So, the question is not simply whether these women were victims. The real question is this: in a system where everything had a price, who was truly being bought and who was setting the price? And when Johnny Carson looked into their eyes across that desk, was he interviewing movie stars? Or was he witnessing the true cost of fame? The 17th of December, 1968, the NBC studio in New York felt heavier than usual. Johnny Carson adjusted his tie more than once that night, glancing toward the wings with a tension he rarely showed. When the band began to play Over the Rainbow, the audience applauded, but the sound was not pure excitement. It carried something else: pity. The woman stepping onto the stage was only 46 years old, yet Judy Garland looked as if she had lived 3 lifetimes. Her hands trembled, her body seemed fragile, almost brittle under the lights. Her smile appeared rehearsed, stretched thin across exhaustion. And as she sat across from Carson, one uncomfortable question lingered in the air. Was this still a star? Or the aftermath of one? To understand that moment, we have to go back to the MGM lot in the 1930s. There, Judy was not treated as a child. She was treated as an asset. Studio executives, including Louis B. Mayer, reportedly viewed her as a profit-generating machine. 18-hour workdays were not uncommon. Filming, rehearsing, promoting. But how does a teenage girl sustain that pace? The answer was chemical. Mornings began with so-called pep pill stimulants designed to keep her alert and energetic. Nights ended with powerful sedatives so she could sleep and repeat the cycle the next day. Uppers, downers, uppers, downers. According to former colleagues, including Mickey Rooney, the use of such medication was widespread in the studio system. Judy was not alone, but not everyone broke the same way. Why did Judy never recover from that cycle? Why did the system seem to mark her more deeply than others? The control did not stop with pills. Her diet was reportedly monitored. Some accounts describe strict meal supervision, chicken soup and black coffee to maintain weight. There are even long-circulating rumors that access to food was restricted to prevent weight gain. Whether exaggerated or not, the message was clear. Her body did not belong to her. She was fitted with a nose cap to refine her appearance. She was told she was not conventionally beautiful. She was molded, adjusted, and chemically stabilized for performance. A studio insider once summarized it bluntly: she belonged to the studio. Belonged. And what does that word do to a young mind? By her late teens, Garland reportedly struggled with severe anxiety, panic attacks, emotional instability, the kind of internal storms that do not simply disappear when the cameras turn off. Fame gave her applause. It did not give her peace. Back on Carson's sofa in 1968, she tried to joke. She laughed at the right moments. But the laughter felt strained, almost disconnected from her eyes. The audience responded, yet something in the room felt fragile, as if everyone sensed they were watching a woman balancing on the edge of something irreversible. 6 months later, in June 1969, Judy Garland was found dead in London from an accidental overdose. She was 47. Was it simply addiction, personal weakness, or the delayed consequence of a system that had begun medicating her before she was old enough to understand what dependency meant? Johnny Carson rarely spoke about that interview in later years, perhaps because the image was too stark, a legend reduced to trembling hands gripping the edge of a desk. In the mythology of Hollywood, Judy Garland is remembered as a voice, a rainbow, an icon. But in that quiet studio moment in 1968, she was something else. She was proof that when beauty becomes currency and performance becomes survival, the cost is rarely paid all at once. Sometimes it is collected slowly, and the debt always comes due. The night Joan Crawford appeared on The Tonight Show, she did not tremble. She entered the studio like a queen who had already survived exile. Perfect posture, perfect lighting, perfect control. Johnny Carson greeted her with respect, almost caution. Joan did not laugh easily. She calculated. Even her pauses felt deliberate. But Joan Crawford was not born Joan Crawford. She was born Lucille Ball, a name studio executives once considered too ordinary for stardom. MGM gave her a new name, a new image, and a new destiny. Reinvention was not optional. It was survival. Hollywood in the 1930s and 1940s was ruthless toward women who aged. One wrong film, one younger face, and the spotlight shifted. Joan understood this better than most. Rumors followed her from the beginning. Persistent whispers claimed she had appeared in early stag films before her rise, allegations that were never conclusively proven but resurfaced whenever rivals sought to undermine her. Whether true or exaggerated, the rumors became part of her mythology. They served as a reminder. In Hollywood, a woman's past could always be weaponized. So Joan built armor. She controlled her lighting on set, demanding that cinematographers shoot her from precise angles. She rehearsed relentlessly. She curated her public persona. One of her most quoted lines captures that mindset. If you want to see the girl next door, go next door. Joan was not interested in being relatable. She was interested in being untouchable. And then there was the rivalry with Bette Davis. The feud intensified during the filming of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Stories from the set describe psychological warfare from alleged sabotages to carefully planted press narratives. One famously attributed quote, often linked to Davis, claimed, "She slept with every male star at MGM except Lassie." Whether exaggerated or not, the line endured because it fit the public appetite for spectacle. But here is the uncomfortable question. Was Joan using relationships as leverage? Or were powerful men using her ambition as leverage against her? After her death, the release of Mommy Dearest, based on her adopted daughter Christina's memoir, reshaped her image permanently. The wire hanger scene became cultural shorthand for cruelty. The public embraced the monstrous caricature with alarming speed. Yet even that narrative is contested. Some insiders described Joan as strict but disciplined. Others painted a colder picture. The truth remains fragmented, filtered through resentment, loyalty, and profit. Back on Carson's stage, Joan projected composure. She spoke of professionalism, of longevity, of standards. But beneath that composure was a lifetime spent fighting invisibility. She once reportedly said she could smell insecurity a mile away, perhaps because she lived with it. In a system that replaced women the moment they aged, Joan Crawford refused to be replaced. She adapted, she calculated, she endured. But at what cost? Did ambition protect her? Or did it slowly isolate her from the very humanity she fought to preserve? Johnny Carson watched her closely that night. The audience saw glamour. Carson may have seen something else, the discipline of a woman who understood that in Hollywood, survival was not about innocence. It was about control. And control, in that world, was the only currency more powerful than beauty. When Shelley Winters walked onto Johnny Carson's stage, the energy shifted. She did not carry herself like royalty. She carried herself like someone who had nothing left to hide. She laughed loudly. She interrupted. She told stories that made the audience gasp and then laugh harder. Carson leaned back more than once during her appearances, half amused, half alert. Shelley did not play the demure movie star. She played the truth, or at least her version of it. But Shelley Winters had not always been that fearless. In the early years of her career, producers reportedly told her something chilling. You're not pretty enough to be innocent, so be dangerous. In Hollywood language, that meant she would never be cast as the fragile princess. She would be the sensual woman, the temptress, the one who knew too much, so she leaned into it. In interviews and later in her memoirs, Shelley spoke openly about relationships with powerful men. Names like Marlon Brando and William Holden appeared in her stories. She once declared, "If I didn't use my sexuality, someone else would use it for me." It sounded like empowerment. It sounded like strategy. But was it? Some critics have long suggested that Shelley may have exaggerated parts of her romantic history, turning private encounters into mythology. Others insist she was simply more honest than her peers. In a system built on silence, confession itself became rebellion. Shelley earned 2 Academy Awards during her career. She was respected for her craft. Yet she was often labeled too much, too loud, too blunt, too sexual. She was sometimes described as the anti-Marilyn, not fragile, not tragic, not soft. But Hollywood has always been uncomfortable with women who narrate their own desire. When she famously threw a drink at Oliver Reed during a chaotic production, the story spread quickly. Some framed it as temperament. Others framed it as defiance. In either case, it reinforced her reputation: unpredictable, unapologetic. And yet, behind the bravado, there were signs of something more complex. Shelley understood the rules. She knew beauty was currency. But instead of pretending innocence, she weaponized awareness. The uncomfortable question lingers. Was Shelley reclaiming control, or was she adapting to a game she never truly escaped? On Carson's couch, she seemed liberated. She owned her past. She owned her body. She owned the narrative. The audience applauded that boldness. But boldness in Hollywood has always carried a hidden cost. When a woman admits desire, she risks becoming the punchline. When she denies it, she risks becoming invisible. So which path is safer? Johnny Carson watched her with fascination, not pity, not caution. Fascination. Because Shelley Winters did something rare in the Golden Age. She removed the mask before anyone could rip it off. And in doing so, she forced Hollywood to confront a truth it preferred to whisper. Sometimes the woman they call scandalous is simply the one who refuses to pretend. When Raquel Welch appeared on Johnny Carson's stage, the audience reacted before she even spoke. There was applause, but there was also expectation. Not of wit, not of depth, of beauty. By the late 1960s, Raquel Welch had become an image before she became a person. The fur bikini from 1,000,000 Years B.C. turned her into a global poster. She was framed, marketed, and exported as a fantasy. The camera did not ask what she thought. It asked how she looked, and she looked extraordinary. But being extraordinary came with confinement. Studios pushed the sex symbol label relentlessly. Scripts that required emotional range were rarely offered. Serious roles slipped past her. Executives feared that audiences would not accept her as intellectual, tragic, or vulnerable. She was too visually powerful for subtlety, they assumed. Too beautiful to be taken seriously. Raquel later insisted, "I never traded sex for a role. I worked." The statement carried both pride and defiance. She was not naive about the industry. She understood how desire operated. But she refused to fully surrender to it. She famously resisted full nudity on screen, setting boundaries in an era when many believed boundaries were career suicide. And yet, she was still boxed in. At one point, after being dismissed from a major production, she fought back, legally challenging the narrative that she was difficult. The case became symbolic. Was she temperamental, or was she simply a woman refusing to be controlled? Even feminist critics were divided. Some saw her as complicit in objectification. Others saw her as navigating a narrow corridor of power with limited tools. In either reading, the same tension remained. If the world only sees your body, how do you convince it that you are more than that body? On Carson's couch, Raquel was articulate, composed, sharper than her stereotype allowed. Carson seemed aware of the contrast. The fantasy the audience consumed did not match the woman sitting in front of them. But fantasy is profitable. Complexity is not. The deeper question lingers. Did beauty give Raquel power? Or did it quietly trap her inside an image she could never fully escape? In Hollywood's golden age, many women were told they were not beautiful enough. Raquel Welch faced a different paradox. She was too beautiful to be free. When Lucille Ball sat across from Johnny Carson, the room felt different. There was no fragility, no scandalous whisper following her name that night. There was authority. The audience laughed easily, but not at her. With her, Lucille Ball was not simply a television star. She was a studio executive, co-founder of Desilu Productions, the woman who approved the original pilot of Star Trek when other networks passed. In an industry where women were assets, Lucy became an owner. But ownership does not erase cost. Behind the red hair and comic timing was a business strategist who understood contracts better than many men in her field. After the collapse of her marriage to Desi Arnaz, she made the decision that stunned Hollywood. She took full control of Desilu and later removed him from leadership. It was practical. It was decisive. It was also lonely. Executives reportedly described her as efficient rather than warm. Lucy wasn't warm, she was efficient. The comment was not meant as praise. In Hollywood language, it meant she operated like a man. And in that era, that was rarely forgiven in a woman. There were other pressures. In the early 1950s, Lucille faced scrutiny during the Red Scare era due to past voter registration tied to the Communist Party, a connection she publicly addressed and ultimately survived. But survival required composure under national suspicion. On Carson's stage, she appeared controlled, witty, polished. She spoke of timing, of craft, of discipline, but behind that composure was someone who had learned that emotion was a liability in boardrooms. The question shifts here. When a woman wins power in a system designed to exclude her, what must she surrender to hold it? Lucille Ball did not trade on seduction. She traded on precision. She mastered television economics. She turned laughter into capital. She built a machine, and then she ran it. Yet even she was not untouched by sacrifice. Her marriage to Desi unraveled under the weight of ambition, distance, and conflicting priorities. She once said, "I loved him. I just couldn't live with him." The line carries both strength and ache. Did Lucille conquer the system, or did she have to become harder than it in order to survive? On Carson's couch, she was treated as legend, not spectacle. But legends can be isolating. When you become the architect of the machine, you no longer stand in front of it, you stand alone behind it. And in Hollywood's golden age, power for a woman was rare. But so was softness once you had it. When Zsa Zsa Gabor appeared on Johnny Carson's show, the audience didn't wait for a punchline. They were already entertained. She entered with glamour exaggerated just enough to feel theatrical. Diamonds, accent, timing. Zsa Zsa did not pretend to be natural. She performed. Even while sitting still, she performed. And perhaps that was the point. By the time she sat on Carson's couch, Zsa Zsa had already been married multiple times, eventually 9 in total. The number became part of her brand. The press treated her love life like serialized drama. She leaned into it. "Every time I leave a man, I keep his house," she once quipped. Another line followed her for decades. "A man in love is incomplete until he is married. Then he is finished." The audience laughed, but beneath the laughter was something strategic. In an industry where women were quietly exchanged behind closed doors, Zsa Zsa made exchange public. She monetized visibility. She turned relationships into spectacle, not scandal, but performance art disguised as romance. Was she frivolous? Or was she brutally honest about how power actually moved in Hollywood? Her infamous 1,989 arrest for slapping a Beverly Hills police officer only reinforced the image: unapologetic, dramatic, untamed. Critics called her ridiculous. Supporters called her fearless. Either way, she controlled the narrative. Unlike Judy, she was not crushed by the system. Unlike Joan, she did not build armor in silence. Unlike Raquel, she did not resist objectification. She exaggerated it until it became absurd. The question becomes sharper. If a woman openly treats marriage as negotiation, does society condemn her because she is immoral, or because she exposed the transaction everyone else pretended was sacred? On Carson's stage, Zsa Zsa flirted with the camera. She teased the audience. Carson played along, amused but observant. He understood timing. So did she. But behind the sparkle was discipline. Reinvention. Survival. Zsa Zsa Gabor did not deny that beauty had value. She simply refused to sell it quietly. And in Hollywood's golden age, that may have been the most rebellious act of all. When Bette Davis sat across from Johnny Carson, she did not perform charm. She performed control. There was no flirtation, no theatrical sparkle. Her eyes were sharp, her posture forward. She spoke with the authority of someone who had already survived war, not on a battlefield, but inside studio contracts. Unlike many actresses of her era, Bette Davis was never marketed as a beauty first. In fact, early studio executives reportedly dismissed her appearance. She was called difficult, unconventional, too intense. So she made intensity her weapon. In the 1930s, frustrated with the roles Warner Brothers assigned her, Davis took a radical step. She sued the studio, arguing that she was being forced into mediocre scripts that would damage her career. The lawsuit failed in British court, but the impact was seismic. A female contract player had publicly challenged the machine. "I am an artist, not a slave," she reportedly declared. That line did not make her popular in executive offices, but it made her dangerous. She deliberately chose roles that stripped away glamour. In Of Human Bondage, she embraced vulnerability and physical plainness. She allowed herself to look unflattering, unstable, desperate. She understood something fundamental: beauty fades on screen. Power does not. And yet, power comes with cost. Her legendary feud with Joan Crawford remains one of Hollywood's most dissected rivalries. During the filming of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, tension escalated into psychological games, whispered insults, and press manipulation. Whether fully factual or partially embellished, the feud became myth, and myth became marketing. But behind the headlines was something more revealing. In a system that rewarded compliance, Bette Davis refused it. That refusal carried consequences. She was labeled difficult, exhausting, impossible. Words often reserved for women who decline to be agreeable. The question cuts deep. When a woman demands creative control, is she strong, or is she punished for refusing submission? On Carson's stage, Davis projected certainty. She was not there to be adored. She was there to be respected. Carson treated her accordingly, with distance, with recognition. One of her most famous lines from All About Eve echoes her real-life persona. "Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night." It was more than dialogue. It was philosophy. Bette Davis did not ask Hollywood to protect her. She prepared to fight it. But here lies the final tension. If you must become harder than the system to survive it, how much of yourself do you sacrifice in the process? In the golden age, softness was marketable. But Bette Davis chose sharpness, and sharpness cuts both ways. When Elizabeth Taylor appeared on Johnny Carson's stage, the room did not see scandal first. It saw legend, violet eyes, diamonds, poise that felt almost royal. Elizabeth did not enter quietly. She occupied space. Even in silence, she commanded it. By the time she sat on that couch, she had already been married multiple times, eventually 8 marriages, including 2 to Richard Burton. The press treated her love life as spectacle. The Vatican publicly condemned her affair with Burton during the filming of Cleopatra. Headlines branded her reckless, immoral, excessive, but headlines never tell the whole story. Elizabeth Taylor had been working since childhood. MGM molded her early, just as it did Judy Garland, but Elizabeth survived differently. Where Judy was medicated into submission, Elizabeth learned to wield attention as protection. Still, survival did not mean immunity. She faced more than 70 hospitalizations over her lifetime. In 1961, she nearly died from pneumonia, requiring an emergency tracheotomy. The world watched updates on her condition as if monitoring a monarch. When she survived, it only deepened the mythology. The most beautiful woman in the world, they called her. But others coined a darker phrase, the most beautiful catastrophe. Addiction followed her later. Painkillers, sleeping pills, substances not uncommon in the industry. But Elizabeth refused the narrative of fragility. She reinvented herself again, this time not as seductress, but as activist. In the 1980s, when many public figures remained silent, she became one of the most visible advocates for AIDS awareness and research. She transformed scandal into influence. Yet the central tension remains. Did Elizabeth Taylor fall in love too easily? Or was she searching for safety in a system that constantly consumed her? On Carson's stage, she was articulate, measured, aware of her own myth. Carson treated her with deference. She was not being interrogated. She was being acknowledged. But acknowledgement does not erase cost. Each marriage, each headline, each hospitalization, each reinvention. They layered over one another until Elizabeth Taylor was no longer just a person. She was narrative. And narratives in Hollywood rarely belong to the person who lives them. So, here is the final question for her chapter. When the world turns you into legend, do you control the story? Or does the story slowly control you? Elizabeth Taylor was not destroyed by the system. She absorbed it, redirected it, outlived it. But even the strongest icons carry fractures beneath the diamonds. And Johnny Carson, sitting across from her, may have understood something few audiences did. Behind the glamour, behind the laughter, behind the spectacle, every legend pays. Hollywood did not create goddesses. It created women who learned how to survive inside a marketplace disguised as a dream. Some were crushed by it, some negotiated with it, some fought it, some mastered it, but none of them walked away without paying a price. Johnny Carson's sofa never judged them. It simply witnessed the smiles, the pauses, and the things that were never said out loud. So the final question is not whether they were scandalous. The real question is this. In a system where everything had a price, would you become the victim or the one who rewrites the rules? If this story made you see Hollywood differently, leave a comment below. Who do you think was the strongest and who paid the highest cost? Subscribe, because we're just getting started.